In the mid-1990s, 5 girls turned pop music on its head. Each one of them was possessed of a steely ambition, an ambition that turned them into the most successful female pop act of all time.
It was kind of almost like Beatlemania for a while.
They made it kind of cool to be a girl again, you know, like girl power.
It was a real high-concept triumph.
But that triumph was short-lived. As one girl's drive soared above the rest, the famous girl power imploded. On the 31st of May 1998, Geri Halliwell, 1/5 of the Spice Girls, inexplicably walked out.
Of course, she was going to leave. She was far more, I guess they describe her as overbearing, but she was far more out there than the rest of them were.
At the time, the Spice Girls were the biggest pop group in the world. In just 2 short years, the 5 unknown girls who'd taken the world by storm were in turmoil. Before the Spice Girls arrived on the scene, the British music industry was in serious trouble.
The second half of the 90s was the worst period for British artists overseas since before the Beatles. There was a real shortage of export. As the head of one of the major labels put it famously, Britpop is a Brit flop.
The 2 dominating genres of music worldwide, grunge and hip-hop, were being produced in America.
Neither of these forms was good for preteens or pretends. Consequently, there's a massive gap in the market.
The gap was partially filled in Britain when the surge of boy bands like Take That arrived.
It was all about boy bands, and it was just the done thing that you put good-looking boys on the cover of your magazine. That was the rule, that was the way it was done. They wanted to stick with something that was reliable. They could rely on boys selling magazines.
There was a definite market for a girl group, and the race was on, not only to discover but to create the nation's next superstars. On the 24th of February 1994, talent managers Bob and Chris Herbert placed an ad in the industry paper, The Stage.
We went through a whole process of auditions, much like you've probably seen on, being rolled out on TV nowadays.
After a lengthy audition process, they hand-picked their final 5.
So the final 5 that only from the audition process were Victoria, Mel C, Mel B, Emma and Geri. Geri, to this day, I don't know how she actually made it into the group and made it through all those preliminary rounds of auditions, because she had the least talent and actually didn't even attend one of those auditions. She managed, each time she would ring up with an excuse that she had laryngitis or chicken pox or whatever, and kind of fast-tracked her way through it. I asked her name and she said Geri, and we said how old. She said, look, I could be as young as you want, I could be a 16-year-old with big or I can be, as old as you want, sort of thing.
The Herberts named the group Touch and moved the girls into a house in Maidenhead.
When you audition for girls and you put them together and they all live together, you get an interesting dynamic happens. You get all kinds of things falling into sync, in terms of how they deal with each other and the way that they deal with each other's ego and temperament and stuff. So there's a different dynamic comes into play at that point that you don't get from conventional relationships or friendships.
That time, the much talked about time when they were all put together in a house in the middle of nowhere and they had to bond and they had to get on, must have been a very interesting time, and but it worked, and he could see them then at close quarters, see what their personalities were like.
The girls' lives revolved around preparing for fame. Melanie Chisholm, Emma Bunton and Victoria Adams were all studying at performing arts colleges. Melanie Brown was a dancer at a holiday resort, while Geri Halliwell was a television game show host in Turkey. The Herberts introduced the girls to a strict regime of physical exercise and rehearsals.
They'll get up, they'll go to the gym, they're all piled into Geri's little beaten up sort of Fiat, down to the gym, and then after they'd been to the gym, they would come down to the studio, which was in Nap Hill, a place called Trinity Studios. It was a perfect place for us to, without kind of going into London and people, sort of prying eyes and that, just to kind of get on and do what we needed to do.
Because the girls had such strong individual personalities, the Herberts decided to rename them Spice. After 10 months of daily rehearsals, the girls were putting pressure on the Herberts to record a demo.
We were just trying to keep the, pull the reins back on it because we didn't feel they were ready. We certainly hadn't started that process of, sourcing songs, defining what the sound would be and all that sort of stuff.
In December 1994, the Herberts invited several key players in the record industry to witness the girls' first performance.
When you've got big characters like that and you kind of keep it all sort of, hold up, it's like letting a champagne cork out of a bottle.
The grueling rehearsal schedule had paid off. The showcase was a resounding success. Spice instantly created a buzz within the record industry.
They're the kind of women that when I grew up in Sheffield, they were the ones who came up onto the top deck of the bus and were really, really loud, and you kind of wanted to kind of edge away from. They had this kind of force and this presence. There was a sense that they were really invading the kind of pop music party.
The girls were hungry for their slice of the pop pie, but they'd only been offered a verbal management agreement. Despite putting pressure on the Herberts to offer a formal contract, none was forthcoming. Increasingly suspicious of their manager's motives, the girls began to plot a way out. Although the Herberts sensed the girls' increasing dissatisfaction, they still went ahead and booked a songwriting session for them.
During that week, the girls staged some big argument amongst themselves, and there was a big storm out at rehearsals, and it all looked like it was all sort of falling apart.
I got a phone call from the studio that I booked for the girls, and this guy said, Elliot, it's Dave from the studio down the road there. Got 2 girls here from a girl band you're working with tomorrow. They need to talk to you. And he put Jerry on the phone, it's Jerry and Mel B. And Jerry said, look, we need to come and see you. And I said, all right, well, directed them to this other place, and they came in and said, look, we've got something to ask you. We're firing our manager tomorrow, and we want to know if you'll still work with us. And I said, of course, yeah, because I don't know your manager. Of course I'll work with you, it's nothing to do with me, sort of thing. They said, look, we drove to Sheffield because they wouldn't give us your phone number. So we just drove to Sheffield to find you and look you up in the phone book. And I said, I'm not in the phone book. And they said, oh, we figured that out 3 hours ago. So I thought that was pretty dedicated and kind of set the scene for how amazing those girls were. It's kind of weird the next morning because Bob, who was Chris's dad, called me to say, the girls aren't going to make it today. They've all got the flu. And I go, oh no, I don't want to deal with this. And I said, look, I'm just going to tell you now, 2 of them are already here. And I know what's going down. So that was a weird kind of way to start the day, but the girls were so determined. And we wrote our first songs together.
This is where it just all came out that, the band was, that they wanted they wanted out. I think Mel B's departing words were, see ya, wouldn't want to be ya, and slam the phone down. And that was it.
By this point, I'd put a studio in my house. So when they would come up, they'd stay over and we'd work in the house. So it was just chaos. It was just constantly noisy. And you can imagine, those 5 in a semi-detached house in Sheffield, it's just mayhem.
The girls were thrilled to be finally writing their own songs, but without a manager at the helm, who would help them realise their dreams of fame?
Mate on Bio.
By December 1994, the girls known as Spice were impatient to sign a record deal. The future looked uncertain, however, when the girls fired their managers after they'd refused to offer them a formal management contract. Now in desperate need of new direction and guidance, the girls were introduced to Simon Fuller, who saw the commercial potential of the group. He signed them instantly.
Chris and Bob Herbert, who were their managers before Simon Fuller took over, were always remarkably gracious about stepping aside, at least in public they were. God knows what anguish they suffered personally, but they acknowledged that Simon had achieved something which had not been done previously. And he was a marketing genius.
I can't honestly say that I would, as an inexperienced manager, would have achieved the success with the girls that Fuller did as a very experienced manager and someone who knows how to build a brand and everything around it. I could say I could do that now, but then I wouldn't be able to.
In September 1995, Fuller secured Spice a recording contract with Virgin Records. After the discovery that Spice was also the name of an adult website in the US, the name of the group was swiftly changed to the Spice Girls. Fuller put the girls into a studio to record their debut album, and by April 1996 they were ready to face the press for the first time.
One of them concocted this myth that they were the girls who always missed out on auditions, and so ended up sitting together, commiserating, and then did that kind of, let's do the show here, we'll rent a house together and just create a show. They didn't mention their first management at all. They said that they'd, on their parents' money, had organised a showcase to get a publishing deal, so then their songs would be paid for, which is not exactly the truth, but I didn't care because it's a good story. Why let the facts get in the way of a good story? Their individual characteristics were shining through, but I think Geri, because she was the most mouthy, was also the one who stood out most in my memory. Victoria, I think, said the least. I do remember her saying that the most exciting thing she'd done so far in her career had been to Barney's, which she loved, in New York. And the only other thing I remember her saying, suddenly out of nowhere, was, your cufflinks match your shirt. And it was, everyone shut up and kind of went, yeah, they do. And then they all started again.
2 months after the publication of their first interview, the girls released their debut single, Wannabe, in the UK. The British record-buying public responded well to the infectious breath of fresh air the girls promised, and the song entered the charts at number 3. The following week, it was at number 1, where it stayed for 7 consecutive weeks.
Wannabe is a classic pop single. It has hooks galore. And one is the title. It's a popular expression of the time. So it is a hook in itself. And then it had this concept of, if you want to be my lover, you got to get with my friends. And the notion of girl power was a very catchy one for girls.
After an aggressive American campaign orchestrated by Simon Fuller, the Spice Girls found themselves in huge demand across the Atlantic. On its release in the US in late 1996, Wannabe debuted at number 11, the highest ever entry by a British act. 4 weeks later, it was at number 1.
That was the big number 1, that you couldn't go anywhere without hearing it. And little girls singing it. Good pop song. It's a good pop song. It's true, it's one of those, if you played a piece of it for someone, they would know it instantly.
I thought it was, maddening fun. I thought it was like a lot of pop hits are sort of enjoyable for their inanity and for their repetition and for their sheer goofiness. So it had that kind of, silly appeal. British acts had not been selling for a number of years at that point. They really sort of broke the curse. But on the other hand, I don't think that they were necessarily thought of as a British act because it was more a demographic thing. They were appealing to a very, very young audience, an audience that really hadn't been tapped before.
Wannabe hit the number 1 slot in 31 countries. Not only was it the biggest selling single by an all-female group, it was also the highest selling debut single of all time. A new era of female pop was born, and the press quickly tagged the girls with 5 alter egos. Victoria Adams became known as Posh Spice, Geri Halliwell Ginger Spice, Mel B Scary Spice, while Emma Bunton became Baby and Mel C Sporty.
Everyone knew their names twice. In other words, you knew that Mel C was Sporty Spice, etc. So you knew 10 names for one group. Now, we've never had that before. It was a masterstroke of merchandising. And it should be studied. I'm not kidding you.
The Spice Girls proved they were no one-hit wonders, becoming the biggest global pop phenomenon of the 1990s. They eventually amassed 9 UK #1 singles and were hailed as the fastest-selling British act since the Beatles.
The Spice Girls were successful because timing is all, in comedy, politics, life generally. And they couldn't have chosen a better moment. They came up with something new. It was kind of almost like Beatlemania for a while. The thing about them is that they delivered on that energy, humour, flair, and actually style that they exhibited in that very first meeting with them.
It's a wonderful expression that not only were certain individuals of their era, they were the era. Well, Spice Girls, you're very definitely talking late 90s Britain.
I think they were huge here. I remember Spice Girls lunchboxes, and I remember little girls dressing up like them, and dressing up like their favorite spice. Little girls wanted to be them. They wanted to be a Spice Girl.
By 1997, the Spice Girls were the biggest music act in the world, and girl power had joined the ranks of pop culture vernacular.
There was a lot of talk about girl power even in that first meeting. Whether they knew it or not, they were surfing a certain zeitgeist and giving some kind of power to tweens and teens and young women.
They all got behind this philosophy, this girl power thing. It made sense to them, and it wasn't just something to tag something on. It was actually something they believed in.
Girl power still continues today. I find myself saying that to people. If somebody is giving a speech somewhere and it's a female, if it's somebody I know, it's like, hey, girl power. And I'm thinking, oh, Spice Girls. So, but I guess they made it kind of cool to be a girl again, like girl power.
It was impressive at the time, but didn't actually bear much scrutiny, the fact that they espoused girl power at every turn, because, of course, in the backgrounds there were men operating the record company, there were men operating the publishing company, there were men, operating the tour promoters, there were men as the management team.
But behind the scenes, a plot was brewing. Beneath the veneer of girl power, rumours had surfaced that the group was unhappy with manager Simon Fuller's control over their lives. On the 7th of November 1997, just 1 week before the release of their second album, Fuller was fired as he lay in a hospital bed recovering from a back operation.
It happens a lot in popular music that when somebody becomes big, they think that that is the new natural state of affairs, that they will always be big. And they forget that it's a team effort. And I'm sure there was at least one, and probably more, of the Spice Girls who thought, okay, we're so big, Simon is not a Spice Girl. And he's annoying us with his demands.
Although Jerry Halliwell was reported to have instigated Fuller's dismissal, the press announced that a rumoured affair between Fuller and Emma Bunton was the real reason behind the decision.
She was asked about it quite a lot, but mainly at the time when they just dismissed him as their manager. So she's never going to be that positive about him, and her answers are very scathing, actually. My tendency is to believe that it wasn't a full-blown relationship. It may have been something, and it may even have played a part in why they decided to dismiss him as the manager.
It was very difficult at the time to get to the bottom of it, but I think Elton John has been, one of the people who's pointed this out, that whenever there's a problem in pop, quite often you have to look at what's going on with the management. And to succeed, the Spice Girls had to be a tightly run ship with a firm hand on the rudder, because you've got all these personalities, working away at, getting to the front of, the stage school queue. And it was obvious that there was no firm hand anymore, and the lunatics had taken over the asylum.
A week after Simon Fuller was fired, the Spice Girls released their second album, Spice World. Although it sold over 10 million copies, it didn't match the success of its predecessor, and it came in for a critical hammering.
The whole process was incredibly rushed. It had to be done in a specific amount of time. It didn't feel like the same kind of energy that the first album did, and it kind of that put me off a little bit, if I'm really honest.
What they were trying to do was really exploit that pop process. I mean, if you look at the Beatles, if you look at the groups of the 60s, they were knocking out albums at a hell of a rate. And so I think the idea was, okay, let's keep with this. But I don't think they realised the kind of maturity of the international music market. That in fact, people want to wait a bit longer. They want to be enticed into it, just like that first article. They wanted to be enticed into the story. So yeah, that was probably the first sign of a misstep.
The second album was indeed rushed, having been recorded in a portable studio on the set of their first feature film, also called Spice World. The film was released for Christmas 1997, and although it was generally panned by the critics, it grossed over $70 million worldwide.
What you ended up with was 5 girls who had huge personalities, a huge talent, who had been given a film to make that did it absolutely to the best of their abilities. And I absolutely refused to kind of try and teach them to act. We were working long days. They did have to be in at 7:30, and they did this every single day. I very much doubt whether I could have made the same movie with a boy band.
I love this idea of them, like, all living together in the bus. It was like the Monkees.
Check. What do you mean, check?
The movie was ultimately not that good. It was probably thrown together really quickly. But, you know, it wasn't very ambitious. It wasn't trying to be Scorsese.
There was a real spirit about it that I liked. I liked the fact that Victoria got to be funny in it. We'd never seen her be funny before, and she is very funny. And I thought that was great.
They're all very, very strong personalities. And I think at your peril, in my opinion, you actually allow one to be the dominant one. They were all equally as dominant.
It's going to be absolutely fantastic. It's going to be broadcast live throughout the whole world.
Okay, well, do you have a message?
Yes. Hola, España. Muchos besos de las chicas picantes.
That's that all the people in France?
I think it's terrible. You know, I think it's just such a poor effort, actually, given the story that they had. I was kind of thinking, oh, maybe we can get a great rock and roll swindle, a great pop swindle out of this. And there was that kind of knowing and this archness to it, which I think they were trying to attempt to get. But they'd overloaded it. This pudding was overloaded with too many elements. And I think it was really the first signs that actually there was nothing to this pop bubble. It was about to burst.
In the eyes of the public, however, the Spice Girls had it all. 2 #1 albums, a hit film, and a fortune in earnings. But one incident in the midst of their world tour was about to destroy the very foundations of girl power.
Exclusive to Bio.
After their record-breaking #1 hit Wannabe in 1996, the Spice Girls' rise to stardom was meteoric and unprecedented. They were the biggest-selling female pop act of all time. At the beginning of 1998, the group embarked on a 6-month world tour. At the end of the European leg in Norway, Geri Halliwell pulled out of 2 shows, reportedly due to illness. She then cancelled a major promotional appearance in London. Rumours about her commitment to the group started to intensify.
We ran quite a few stories about that because, remember, this was the biggest thing to hit the British music business in a very, very long time. And so our readers, who were all part of the British music business, were absolutely fascinated by it. For them, it wasn't tabloid tittle-tattle. It was actually their business, you know, and there was a lot riding on them for quite a while. So it's no surprise that the schedule that they underwent, the travelling, the different personalities between them, it's no surprise that very quickly those cracks would appear.
On the 31st of May 1998, Halliwell's solicitor confirmed what the press had already begun speculating.
Sadly, I would like to confirm that I have left the Spice Girls. This is because of differences between us. I'm sure the group will continue to be successful, and I wish them all the best. I wish to apologize to all the fans and to thank them and everyone who's been there. Lots of love, Jerry. P.S. I'll be back.
The remaining Spice Girls immediately released their own statement.
The Spice Girls are here to stay. See you at the stadiums. We're sorry to all our fans for having to go through all of this. All our love, Victoria, Emma, Mel C, Mel B. Friendship never ends.
Jerry's departure made headline news all over the world.
The fact that Jerry made the front pages when she went solo indicated the ubiquity of the Spice Girls. Here is the one who seems to be the leader, at least the most articulate, and she isn't going to be a Spice Girl anymore. That's why it was news, and that's why the editors thought, front page, people will buy this. And there was phenomenal interest in Jerry.
There was kind of a nation mourns, atmosphere over a pop group. I think it spoke about the values of Britain by that time in particular. This was the beginning of celebrity culture. And of course, all of them benefited from that.
You just had to look at the newsstand on that day to know that there's something going on here, that celebrity has become a new obsession. And of course, the other thing to bear in mind is this was the peak, I think, of the whole Clinton thing. So for that to be shoved off the front pages by a small matter of a woman walking out of a five-piece band is quite incredible.
Jerry remained vague about the reason for her departure from the group, so it was only natural for the press and fans to ask why she had ditched not only Ginger Spice, but also her friends.
They couldn't bear each other. There was the faction that remained, and her. Personal antipathy, solo ambitions. It happens with every group.
Maybe Jerry saw the way things were going. Maybe Jerry thought that there is a really good solo career up for grabs here, but it's going to go to the one who leaves first. And that's often the view, particularly in the boy or girl bands. There may have been that, but I have no reason to doubt that her schedule not allowing her to do the things she wanted was a huge problem, as it would be for anyone. It's a tough life being in one of those bands. It's very demanding.
I think that the energy, the message, the girl power message, had been shouted and announced, and I don't know if it meant the same thing to her. So she wanted to go off and kind of get her thing going again.
In the aftermath, Jerry tried to convince the press she left simply because she was exhausted.
I would have thought there would have been a genuine exhaustion. Whether it was strictly physical or mental exhaustion, which comes when you no longer completely believe in the project. When you completely believe in what you're doing, you don't get tired as easily as when you begin to have your doubts. As soon as you start thinking, should we be doing this? Why am I doing this? That's really when you shouldn't be doing it.
Although Jerry's real reasons for suddenly quitting remained unclear, her decision was no surprise to some.
These kind of groups tend to have a very short shelf life. First of all, I mean, when you're appealing to a very young audience, they're going to change really fast in the same way that, like, kids go out of their shoes, at a very young age. They go to their pop groups just as quickly. So it was never going to last that much longer than that anyway.
When a group gets really big very quickly, and especially if it's a younger group, there's the burnout factor, there's the ego factor, and that usually makes bandmates fighting and starting to hate each other, and no matter how much you try to pretend that doesn't exist on stage, it does.
It's not easy to be a worldwide international pop star, contrary to popular belief. Not that it's not fun, but there's a huge amount of pressure on them. It's very hard to sort of conquer the world. You have to be everywhere at once. They had personal problems, I mean, as the girls started to crack up, I think.
What happened to girl power when Spice become poor?
No,
oh, you're so negative!
Girl power still carries on. Have you not got girl power?
Although the remaining girls continued as a foursome, Their fans undoubtedly felt cheated. After their world tour ended, they all took a break to assess their future. Geri Halliwell, however, seized the opportunity to launch her solo career. Her debut album, Schizophonic, sold over 2 million copies, although she came nowhere close to matching the success she'd had with the Spice Girls.
I was quite impressed, actually, by some of Geri's singles. I mean, this wasn't a great era for pop music, and what she did with every single was create a real event. Geri cannot fail to be noticed. Geri is one of those people who needs to be front of mind, and everything she did was to create a splash. I met her actually in the promotional period, and she was just one of those people who was on top form, who just loved life, and it's very infectious. She's a great person to be around, is Geri Halliwell.
Although Geri's solo career was a moderate triumph throughout Europe, success in America eluded her.
I had actually interviewed her at that time. I remember she pinched my ass. She was very flirty and fun. Not hugely talented, but, but fun.
Geri did not deliver a killer first album, but she was never going to. She was a conceptual thinker in the pop culture rather than a great musical talent. But she's a very savvy woman.
She used her fame to become an ambassador for the United Nations Population Fund, regularly visiting underdeveloped countries.
I am famous, okay? Lots of people know who I am, and I am damn well going to use my fame positively.
Meanwhile, the remaining Spice Girls regrouped and in November 2000 released their third album, Forever. Its R&B edge was a distinct departure from their earlier pop sound, and as a result, it flopped.
The record just didn't stand up at all. The whole project by that time had an air of desperation.
No longer in control of their careers or their fans, in early 2001, the Spice Girls announced they were taking a temporary break. It was the beginning of the end. Mel B had already started releasing her own material as a solo artist, but she alienated most Spice Girl fans by marketing herself as a rap act.
In terms of a solo career, I think that, she's evidently struggled because she doesn't know what she wants to be, really. I mean, she was sold to us as a ragga hard girl at the time, but I would detect much musical ability there.
I know Mel. She comes from up the road from where I come from, so she was about as urban as I am, I think. And we come from very similar backgrounds, so I didn't kind of believe it as much, because at the end of the day, she was a pop artist, not a, she didn't come from the hood.
Melanie Brown has, however, kept herself in the spotlight with a series of volatile relationships. In 2000, she ended her brief marriage to dancer Jimmy Gulzar, and in 2006 dated Hollywood actor Eddie Murphy. When she discovered she was pregnant soon after they split, Murphy denied the baby was his. After Melanie gave birth to a daughter in April 2007, her lawyers ordered Murphy to undergo a DNA test, which proved he was indeed the father.
I'm speaking out today because I recognise that there are millions and millions of single mothers and their children who don't have a voice, who also wish for their fathers of their children to participate and share the responsibility for their children's lives.
To suddenly see her talk in a very emotional way about this relationship with Eddie Murphy, and she's just left there completely bereft, having to put on a fixed smile for the cameras, was a very different side to her that we've seen before. And it was interesting to see her like that, interesting to see someone who's seen as infallible being completely fallible. And I think we warmed to her a bit more then, actually.
Leave it to America. That's what's all over. That's the most important thing that's going on in the world is Eddie Murphy had a baby with a Spice Girl. Go figure.
Emma Bunton gave birth to a boy in 2007, and as a solo artist has achieved mixed success.
You would never have expected a heavyweight pop career from Emma Bunton. And so on those terms, frothy, light, bubbly, positive, all of those things she delivered.
I just feel it's natural, and I'm a very positive person. I've been brought up to be very positive, and so, and I just hopefully put a smile on everyone's face, because they put smiles on my face, which is brilliant.
She seems, to me, the most content of all 5 of them. I think she's got one hell of a life. I think she's... Whenever I see her, and I kind of occasionally see her, and she's just all smiles, and life's pretty great for her. And she's one of those kind of people whose glass is always half full. She's happy with her lot.
Victoria, aka Posh, has undoubtedly maintained the highest profile since the Spice Girls split. In 1999, she married football star David Beckham, and through their various endorsements and glamorous lifestyle, they're one of the most famous couples in the world. Fortunately for Victoria, her interest in fashion has overwhelmed her disastrous solo career.
Victoria is a classic study who should be taught in sociology classes in years to come. She was a girl who had an image of being a posh girl, and she became a posh girl. And she now inhabits that role. She wears it. And to people who have just come on the scene in the last 10 years, she is it.
Victoria Beckham, more than any of the Spice Girls, has had a lot of criticism, personal at times. And, you know, because of the work she does in fashion and because a lot of her life is posing for photos, you know, she knows she's going to be open to a bit of that. But I think also people can be quite cruel. The people who are critical of her personality have never met her. She is a very funny person and very smart and great fun to be around.
In February 2009, Mel C became a mother. Of them all, she's been the most musically prolific.
She has, you know, hooked up with people like Bryan Adams and made a few decent rock records. You know, I was there at V99 when she did her version of Anarchy in the UK. And it was hilarious, actually. But on those terms, it was, you know, it was quite good. Good for her, I thought.
It's nice to be known as an individual as well as a member of a band. So, always a Spice Girl, but always an individual.
Everything for her was about getting the music out there. And the rest that came with it, she was partly bewildered by it. She didn't understand why anyone was interested in her when she wasn't with the Spice Girls. I have to say, though, she kind of always put on a brave face. She kind of, in the end, knew that was the deal. But it was never her favourite thing, and she would very politely do everything she could to play down that whole excitement about her as a celebrity. She just didn't like her.
The limited success of each of the Spice Girls' solo careers proved that commercially the group was greater than the sum of its parts. What would it take for the girls to finally settle their differences and take to the stage one more time?
History and Hollywood, Sunday from 11 on History.
In 1998, the Spice Girls were rocked by the sudden departure of Geri Halliwell. In 2001, the remaining 4 finally went their separate ways. 2 years later, however, Geri appeared to have buried the hatchet with her former bandmates, and it wasn't long before a reunion was on the cards. In July 2006, on the 10th anniversary of Wannabe reaching #1, a long-awaited announcement was expected. But that announcement never happened, and the blame was placed firmly on Mel C.
Spice Girls would be back together several years ago if it wasn't for Mel C. She held out. I don't know what the deal she has and whether it's different from the rest of the band, but it had to be pretty good to entice Mel C back into the fold. She would always say, listen, it's never going to happen. Never, ever, ever. And then gradually that became, you know, we would never, you know, release a new album. To gradually, you know, it became, you know, we'd not got any plans, but, you know, if it was a big charity gig, then we'd do it. Then suddenly, I'm back in. And, you know, it must have taken a real loss of pride for her to do it, because she was never, ever in a million years going to do this.
On the 28th of June 2007, the girls announced that the group was reforming for a world tour.
It's like family, it really is. Yeah. Doesn't matter how long we've been apart, it just feels like yesterday.
Yeah.
It's our sisters.
And you know, we experience something so unique together that we're always going to have a bond, no matter how long it is between seeing each other. So yeah, you know, sometimes we might fall out, but we love each other and always get back together, as you can see.
We're like kids together.
It's a bit like, supposing you've ever got divorced and you've fallen in love with your ex-husband again.
Jerry,
That's how it feels like to me.
Jerry, right, okay.
Great, we love it. She just appreciates the fact we've let her back in.
They're like people who've been through a trauma together. They weren't necessarily friends when they started out, but they've all got scars and battle wounds and, you know, experiences to share. So yeah, you do get the impression that this is a bunch of, you know, early middle-aged women. They've had kids, they've had partners, they've had varying degrees of celebrity and success individually. So you can see why they would want to get back together and maybe compare notes.
They embarked on a 3-month world tour in December 2007, with the first London show selling out in a record-breaking 38 seconds.
There's the whole new generation to entertain. I was such a Spice fan, you know. I'm a complete and utter Spice boy. I'm proud of it.
While the news of a Spice Girls reunion was almost inevitable, what astonished most critics was that the girls turned once more to the man they'd unceremoniously dumped at the height of their career, Simon Fuller.
I think it was just a culmination of things that led to that breakdown in relationship. And here we are again with Simon at the helm, you know. It's ironic, but like I say, it's full circle all over again.
With Fuller's savvy steering and the reported millions they would earn, many cynics wondered if the reunion was merely a smart business move, and were the girls ever really friends?
It was in their interest to be friends, but they did genuinely love each other as well. I was there, you know, and there were like proper fist fights in my house. I remember it all kicking off upstairs one day and wondering what the hell was going on and needing to go out and calm this down a bit, you know. But they worked it out, you know, and they just had a way of dealing with each other which was distinctly Spice Girls.
I think the girls were friends. I mean, you look at them now and you think, well, this is 5 very different girls from different backgrounds. But boy, you know, there's something that links these 5 girls, and that's just having a real laugh.
Were they friends? No, I doubt it. But they were willing partners. And, well, they still are. Willing to set their differences aside for the greater good, which is the expansion of their bank accounts and fame.
The Spice Girls transformed not only pop music, but also the way it was marketed. By returning to the stage a decade later, girl power was back in business.
Their legacy, I think, is to show that you can actually achieve anything you want to achieve on a complete global level. And they showed that it wasn't just a male-dominated industry. Pop at the time was all about boy bands, and they completely turned it on its head. And every now and again, something comes along that changes the world musically, and that was one of those things. There was something that was very clever about the whole Spice Girls setup. Here was a group of people with very strong personality, and their personality was kind of infused into everything about them. The music, the lyrics, the videos, the marketing.
They inaugurated this era of Z-list celebrity pop fodder, boil-in-the-bag pop. They kind of started it, and that's why I kind of liked it at the beginning, because it was very funny.
They stepped into this breach and just effortlessly blew aside all the obstacles.
Spice Girls was a modern-day female movement. You know, it was girl power, and they were girls on a mission, and they went and took the world by storm.
Casino, a Scorsese